Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the latest in our community event series that we're always hosting here at People Managing People. We host these to give our audience a chance to engage with experts who contribute to our People Managing People content and community. So we're happy to be able to we're happy that you were able to join us today and take part. My name is David Rice. If you didn't already know that, I'm the executive editor of People Managing People. Now, today's session is going to focus on what HR can learn from customer experience to scale engagement without losing that human touch. And we'll be speaking with some really great voices, thought leaders in the space. So, first up, we have Mary Poppen. Mary is the president and CXO at uh, is it Horizons or HR Horizons?
Horizons.
Horizons. She's the author of Goodbye Churn, Hello Growth, and a leading voice in customer and employee experience strategy. She's got decades of experience in SaaS and HR tech, and she helps companies align people, process, and product to drive lasting growth. Mary, welcome.
Thanks, David. Hi, Dora. Really good to be with you guys today. So looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, we have Adora Ikwuemesi. She is the founder of Kender Consulting and a trusted advisor to founders and execs on people strategy. She's got a career spanning HR transformation, coaching, public sector reform, and she's known for empowering leaders to build resilient teams and HR pros to thrive in complexity. So, Adora, welcome. I think we had you on mute.
See, yes. Thank you, David.
All
I think
right.
I'll just off mute. Okay, thank you. And nice to
Excellent.
meet you again, Mary, and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. We may have one more joining us. We're not
Yeah.
sure if she's able to make it or not. She's had a little bit of some things come up. So, but possibly joining us would be Vanessa Monsequeira. Uh, sh- she's a VP of people at Gorilla and a leadership coach who treats employee experience like product design. So hopefully she's able to hop in with us and we'll introduce her when she gets here. Um, but if not, we are certainly happy to have the two of you. So, uh, little context setting for the session, given what's going on right now, there's a lot of changes in the workplace. There's a lack of trust. Disengagement is increasing. It's already pretty high. Everyone is expected to implement automation wherever possible, right? Employee experience, as ever, plays such a key part in how people engage with their employers and whether or not we get it right, is going to play an integral part in the success of our orgs moving forward. We've dumped millions into research, experimentation, and learning around the customer experience, which is easy to understand, right? You want folks to buy your products, but how we get people to buy into being part of our organizations and goals is equally important to the overall success of the business. And so that begs the question, right? What can we learn from customer experience and what we've developed there and apply it to employee experience? Where do we know we can't automate? And where is there opportunity to enhance the employee experience and our ability to shape it with automation? So, with that in mind, I want to start here. I'm curious about looking at some of the most valuable things that CX teams have learned down the years, things that HR teams maybe often get wrong, in your opinion. And I want to start with Mary on this, and let you kind of open us up.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is a great question, and one I think many of us have been looking to solve for a long time. One of the things that CX does really, really well is listens to the customer across the entire journey, and they leverage that data to make informed decisions about how to improve the customer experience, right? In HR doesn't always take the approach of listening to employees across the entire life cycle, but maybe only at key change times in the organization or once a year in an engagement survey, which really isn't enough to know what's going on with your employees on an ongoing basis, right? So I think really taking that model from CX and applying that listening strategy across your employee life cycle will give companies that, insight and sort of ongoing trends that will help make the best decisions on where to improve employee experience. And then the other thing I'll add is CX usually does and is in a position to do a really good job on cross-functional alignment and driving results across functions to improve the customer experience. It doesn't always happen on the HR side. It's almost like HR programs are HR's responsibility, and they have to influence the functional leaders to take action instead of having cross-functional alignment and ownership of employee experience across functions, right? And to share data and actions like they do for CX. So I think those are kind of two areas that I would focus on.
Hmm. Oh, customer experience professionals talk a lot about moments that matter, right? And I'm curious, how can HR teams start identifying these key moments across the employee life cycle and know which ones need that human touch, right? Now, Dora, you've done some research around employee engagement, particularly in the remote setting, which I think a lot of us are very interested in. And I want to start with you here, but in your opinion, what are some of those key moments that matter for employees and that they need that human engagement?
Okay, thank you. Right. One thing I love about customer experience, and I would say the best of HR has always taken the same approach. I mean, HR, when you talk about good HR and you talk about bad HR, it's like a spectrum, right? I find that the best HR teams, our customers, are our employees. So if you look at a performing HR team, they typically will have like an HR scorecard. And if you're familiar with scorecards, there's usually a customer segment, right? You have like if you're familiar with scorecards, you'd have financial KPIs, you have customer KPIs, process, yeah. With HR teams, really high performing HR teams, we typically have employee in place of customers. So immediately I already see the synergy. I see that, the customer experience and employee experience are two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. And when we talk about moments that matter, I liken it to in CX, I would call it the customer journey mapping, right? So what would typically happen in customer journey mapping is like, brands anticipate the needs of the customers, right? And they create moments of delights amongst at touch points, right? So I think the best HR teams do very similar, right? In terms of the parallel is that they use an employee journey map to uncover key engagement moments. And of course, where do these happen? At times like onboarding, career growth, and feedback loops through like maybe the performance management system. And of course, in remote work, which is where most of my research is, we focus on that, how engagement is different in a remote work context, right? So based on my research, remote employees often feel disengaged at transition points, right? Because onboarding is very in an office is very different from onboarding in in a remote setting, because you never get to see the person. Just compare, you can't even compare it. So if leadership is not proactive, then it's even a more difficult battle there. So I think for me, when it comes to moments that matter, when we look at CX, we look at the customer journey. When we look at from the employee side, from HR, we look at the employee journey, and we can use, their key moments where we can create a delightful experience, such as when people are being onboarded, when they're transiting, during their performance reviews, or, things like that. So that's where I see the similarities.
Excellent. Oh, Vanessa's been able to join us. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you so much. In the world of remote work, it was part of my time and confusion in Amsterdam. So super lovely to talk, meet with you all, and have this awesome discussion.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're just having a doorway in on sort of moments that matter and how to kind of identify those key moments in the employee life cycle and know which ones need the human touch, which was versus which ones maybe are more ripe for automation. And I'm curious to get your thoughts to kind of help welcome me into the session. What are some of those moments that are kind of ideal for both.
For automation, I think maybe a step back. I think before we automate things, there's kind of that, excuse my French, but like shit in, shit out. If your process is not good and you just automate it, there's clinks here. So I think talking of like building on what Adora said in terms of like the customer experience, I think before we even look at automation, it's thinking through what are we trying to achieve here? And for me, I come from the world of building people as a product. So I think at the end game, if you like, what is the true product here that we're trying to build? So one of the use cases is onboarding. If that's our product, what is the ideal experience? And then what is the product we're trying to build? And where do we automate and where do we want a personal experience? But I think automation's become like a really sexy word. So everyone's just like, let's automate things. But then you're putting Zapier or N8N through like someone getting something from their ATS to their HR tech system. So I'd say that was the first thing is we in our people team, we've kind of zoomed out and said, what are the core products? The main product in the people space is the employee value proposition. What are the augmented products around employee experience, around performance, around onboarding, around performance, around career progression? And then I think what we're looking at is where do we still need manual human operations? And then where do we automate? So at the moment, if I'm transparent at Gorilla, I'm still like, today is actually my 1 year in role. We're still looking at simple automations between the tech stack, which we had to put a full tech stack in from the onboarding experience. And I think our next level of automations and then even augmentation to AI, it's been my dream for like over a decade, is personalized learning journeys. Imagine if you could actually have the automation and that intelligence to augment someone's team leader or their coach and a manager to start helping them look through what do I automate in my one-to-ones with my team as a team leader? And then when do I need that additional intelligence around areas of gap and areas of growth? If I look at maybe an area of automation that has backfired, to be fair, I don't think we've had anything that's truly backfired, but I'm sure we've had a few mishaps in the onboarding experience as well. And I think if we truly look at any product, whether it's a SaaS product or the employee experience, onboarding is the most important part for speed to efficacy and making people have longer retention. So I think we just, if someone gets an email that doesn't make sense, or just an onboarding experience, it kind of creates a funny first taste in their mouth. I think conversely, I know this has happened in a company when after they did, wasn't my experience, but they did a level of reduction in force, and people still started getting like the swag packs because it was automated and they hadn't done a proper offboarding. I think that's a pretty painful kick in the gut that something's really great in terms of its automation, but hasn't read the climate or the tone for employees.
And Vanessa, you just made me think of something else. Just if things can be automated, doesn't mean they necessarily should be, right?
Good.
So
Yeah.
I worked for a company that actually decided to automate fully the performance and compensation letters and sending them out in the organization. And not only, did that sort of take away the opportunity for the manager to have that conversation with the employee at the end of the cycle. But what happened was people got the wrong letters, and it caused a lot of anxiety, anger, questions for HR. They didn't know like how many wrong letters had gone to how many wrong people, so they had to recall it. It was just a nightmare. And so it just leads me to believe like in those situations, always, I think the human side of that kind of process and wrapping up that experience with that human touch makes such a difference, right? But in this case, it went to the extreme, not just automating the message, but it was wrong, So just reminded me that certain things you should really ask yourself, we can automate this, but is it going to have the ultimate impact we want?
And I also think based on that, if you are going to automate and something's high risk, like are you going to spend enough time doing the user testing on it? Because I think from a CX and then a product perspective, they spend a lot of time user testing high risk things for customers and clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. in CX, personalization, that's everything, right? I'm curious, and Adora, I'll start with you, but everybody feel free to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
How can HR teams personalize at scale without overburdening people teams or maybe even like crossing boundaries a little bit?
Hmm. I think it's even just listening to that, it's a paradox, isn't it? Because personalization and scale, like, you know, is it even feasible? It's just every time you think about scale, you think about something you can automate and do a lot of quickly, right? And I believe just to buttress on what Mary has said, it's difficult. It's difficult to take out that human element. I think the most important from even the examples Mary gave and Vanessa have given as well, once they're highly emotional or personal, then it's very difficult to automate and it's dangerous and risky to automate. Another thing I would say on personalization, again, if we look at CX, personalization is fantastic because, I even love the idea of, in marketing, personas, right? When you understand the persona, you can develop a product. The same thing you're doing in product design. If you segment your employees and you know the different demographics or, the different personas, let me not say demographics, because demographics can be limited to age and it's not just about that. It's about interest, about values, right? Now that helps you with designing your products or your solutions. So is it scalable? Well, with AI, if you get the right data in, yes, then you can do it as long as it's accurate. But the problem with automation, just like Mary's example, is just one thing needs to go wrong and everything is wrong, right? It could just be one data set. Because I've had a similar experience in doing some data analysis in which a row was empty, just one row. Sorry, yeah, just one data set, not a row, just one, you know? And the whole computation is wrong because AI or sometimes automation doesn't know that if I don't have this information, I should alert or I shouldn't, compute. And it does it anyway. And that's how it mixes up letters belonging to this person, to that person, because there was probably just one data set that was missing and it didn't know how to respond to that because it wasn't programmed to deal with that type of challenge. Yeah. So I would say that it's, um, with advancement in technology, it will be possible, of course, because once it has data on a particular person, it can definitely personalize for you. As long as it has all the data, it can give personal, it can personalize all the outcomes or the solutions for each individual. So until you get there, if you're able to train your systems to that point, then you get personalization. Personalization is great. Everyone likes to feel special. I would like to know that this was specially designed for me, right? It's a great thing, but obviously it comes with advancements in technology and you can't afford the errors because if you if it makes a mistake, then the personalization, what should have been a really joyful, delightful moment, becomes a very emotional, disastrous moment, just like the examples that have been cited.
And I just to kind of add to that, I was just thinking, and I saw Mohammed posted something on Netflix. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think we maybe get caught up in personalization being kind of one-to-one. And I like to think sometimes personalization actually is just having choices. So reward and recognition systems, I think, are a great example because you can build a great scalable process and program, but leave it to the individual to have options that feel very personalized, right? They could have wellness equipment that, they could share with their family. They could choose vacation, gift cards or something and go with their family. So sometimes I think we just need to think about personalization as a starting point being giving them some choices.
Yeah. And I think riffing off that, I just put like I'm sure everyone's seen this picture, which is like, well, when you do customer experience or UX research, and then people go and build and maybe they over-engineer things and we're personalizing. So what Adora's talking about is like, do you actually need that level of personalization or Mary as well? So I think sometimes we over-engineer it. And so I'd really be asking myself, what is the minimum viable product we need? And are we over-engineering it? Or is the people say, like in that picture, they need a seat and what they want is a swinging tire, and we're trying to personalize and do all these complex things, or we don't have the data sets. And people actually probably don't even want that. So I think a lot of this in true customer experience and before that, the UX is understanding what people want, build the right thing, and then build the thing right.
Absolutely. You know what I forgot to do was share the poll results. I think we've got some good results that Michael's going to put up. So here we go. Let's see. Biggest obstacle seems by far is that risk of losing personal connection and trust. And like we said at the outset, and as we've seen on a lot of our recent events, trust is this ongoing issue. I want to get everyone's thoughts on this because this is something I find fascinating. How much does automation actually undermine trust? Because we're seeing with like the younger generation, they don't always mind it, right? But then at the same time, they want to go into the office and build relationships. So it's almost like the things that you think would be intuitive are not. I think a lot of us would have been surprised when we found out that so much of Gen Z wants to work in person, right? Um, I'm curious what all you all's thoughts is on like sort of the how do I put this? The actual like overall risk of automation to uh trust, I guess. And anyone feel free to jump in. I'm gonna make that one a walk. If you have a opinion on it, please.
I think, let me go. I think you can't, how do you have trust without a relationship, right? Relationships are very key for trust to happen. If there's no personal or human touch, how do you trust something that you don't have a relationship with? So I see them as, trust and relationship are one and the same. And you have relationships with people, not with things, right? So
Absolutely.
so in my opinion, definitely, trust goes hand in hand with relationships, which mean personal connection. They might not be physical in terms of you might not be seeing the person face to face, but you are communicating with them, right? Because the basis of any relationship is communication. So whether the communication is virtual, that's a different matter. It doesn't really matter. But as long as you're communicating with someone one-on-one, then you can build a relationship and you can build trust. It's difficult to build. How do you can trust a system, I guess, in in a sense, but that level of trust is not the same as how you trust a human being. That's based on, the capability of a system, not on having a relationship in which you can be vulnerable. And of course, with vulnerability comes a whole different set of, relationships. So yeah, so that's the perspective I would see it from.
For me, I love that. I think anything that is human, like real people centered, where you need a human connection, you probably don't need to automate it. For me, I just think we have to decide what's the outcome what are we automating in the people space? Because some things don't break trust. Like if I have an automation that sends out all of my reporting from my ATS and my HRS and doesn't mean that I need or someone in my team needs to tinker around manually
Yeah.
with spreadsheets and like wicked. Automate, go for your go for it. There's no issue with automating things that are administrative, that are monotonous, and that have zero, like almost zero risk that's employee facing, but that enables the employee experience. I think there's different parts in automating, like cleanups within tech systems, compliance and reporting. It's kind of like that's what automation should be for us, all the boring things that we have to do and that people waste their time doing. I think also automations, if we have popular documentation, like proper documentation information, automate how we find that, use augmented intelligence to find those things, and even sort of automating, certain things that suggest people's learning pathways in a learning management system. There's really no risk there. At the moment, none of those are really personal, but someone's manually sitting behind there. I think there's the pieces that we shouldn't fully ever automate, like should be kind of stock standard, like employee relations and conflict resolution, performance management conversations. Use automations or augmented intelligence to help, but not replace hiring decisions, leadership and succession planning. There's so many things that are more, anything that's more sensitive, and that, it's a litmus test. Would I feel a high level of emotional in this? How would I react to this? That's generally a good litmus test to say it probably shouldn't be automated. And I think, to be fair, automation is almost yesterday's story. Everyone's looking at what's the game now with automation, augmented intelligence, and then full AI, artificial intelligence. And I have to be honest, I don't think most people, and I can say that in different teams I've led, have even got automation right due to the data story. So I think that's almost like level 1, where we all need to be like level 10 already. So I think sometimes the sexiness of automation have led to some of like the things Mary was talking about, is like, let's not automate for the sake of automating. And I remember I was at a great talk by Don Price, who's like been one of the work futurists at Atlassian, and he stole part of this quote from somewhere else. And he'd said, a fool with a tool is still a fool. You've made them faster and potentially more dangerous. So I think once again, it's like first principles, what are we trying to solve for? And then let's look at the automations and the intelligences on top of that, instead of going tool first and solution first.
Yeah.
I love those examples. And I was also just thinking about kind of trust on a couple of different levels, right? One is trust in the data and that you're going to have what you need to be successful, or have something that's going to make you unsuccessful. The other piece I was thinking is that people start wondering, okay, this automation is going to replace me, or this automation is going to double my workload. Not be helpful, right? So you're able to scale customer quarterly, partnership meetings. Great. Now you can do 20 instead of 10 a quarter, right? So I feel like it's also that, and it comes down to what Adora was saying about communication and being transparent about what you're trying to accomplish. To your point, Vanessa, the objective, right, of using the automation, and then being really clear with people. What is the outcome we're trying to accomplish, and what is their role in getting there too, right? Because they play a role in helping the organization. So I feel like all of those pieces tie together with trust, coming to communication and transparency probably being the most important.
Yeah. Hmm. And I think I love the litmus test on anything that would be emotional, right? But I think something where we miss it is that we don't always take our time to assess whether there will be an emotional component to it. And without going into the details of the Workday lawsuits, I'm not looking at it from a legal perspective, but recruitment, I've always been an advocate of recruitment is one of the most time-consuming HR processes. And I personally have always advocated for automating as much as you can, right? And of course, as getting as much data as you can, because it will help it be more efficient, be faster. But we see a clear case where the recruitment process, and all of us have been in a situation where we have applied for jobs. And in this case, someone applied for jobs, had applied for 100 jobs, and they got, they're getting automated rejection. And how did this come to light? You get a rejection before you even finish typing, like literally. How could they have reviewed my application so quickly? So it was obvious that AI automation was doing the shortlisting. And obviously, there must have been keywords it was looking for. But this person was able to say, look, I've been discriminated against based on, my age or, whatever. And look at it, it was such a big risk. And, they have been, the company has been sued, and the judgment has been in the favor of it's now a class action, right? So no one would have seen this risk, right? Because they automated. But guess what? And this is what happens with technology. Without that human direction, it goes wrong. And in this case, what could have happened differently? Maybe someone, I don't know, could have overlooked the recruitment process, because employees, not just employees, even potential employees, because that's a moment of, moment of truth. Let's borrow from CX. The recruitment process, that's a touch point, right? When potential employees get to, experience your process. And in this case, there's like a failure. There's a customer service breakdown of sorts. In this, it's potential experience or potential employee breakdown, because they didn't feel like they were given a fair assessment or a fair shortlisting. So these are things that we need to, the risk. I think we're not very aware of the risk yet. And I believe that as we continue to, experiment and technology continues to advance, we will see. I wasn't expecting this. I can't, as an HR practitioner, I wasn't expecting this lawsuit, right? Because we didn't think that far. And I think experience will give us more instances in which we will be able to decipher and think broader to how no one thought that somebody applying for a job could sue a company because they felt they were discriminated by a tool. And guess what? A very interesting thing in the judgment was that I think, the company said that they were not an agent or an agency, so they shouldn't be held responsible. And guess what? Why the judgment said the AI in this instance was acting as their agents. So that was why the judge ruled. You're not an agency, but AI, a tool that you've invested in, is your agent. And we can't, we can't sue AI. You're the company who's made that investment. So that's a very interesting perspective. And I think there's a lot of lessons for all of us, because even, we don't always know all the possibilities and all the scenarios that could play out. We just know what we know. And, it's interesting to see how this unfolds.
Well, so we've got maybe about 25 minutes left. I do want to remind everybody, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat, or you can submit them in the Q&A, however you prefer. We're going to start kind of collecting those and making sure that we get to ask those. But I wanted to ask this too before we kind of move on to that. And Mary, we'll start with you on this. Curious about mindset shifts that need to happen inside HR just to start thinking more like a product team or a CX team when designing employee journeys.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest mindset shifts that needs to occur, probably in a lot of organizations, at least a lot I've worked with, is that employee experience is not HR's job. It is everyone's responsibility. It should be built into the operating cadence of the company, right? Just like alignment on actions across business priorities and customer priorities, employee priorities should also be part of that conversation. So I think that's a really big part. And it's not just leaders and managers that own it either. The employees play a role in their own engagement, their own experience. So giving feedback and speaking up and being part of the solution, not just announcing the problems, but actually being a part of it as well, is a key part of getting the whole organization aligned. And then cross-functional alignment too, just on overall people strategies. So having HR at the table in those boardrooms and talking about, I think Adora, you were mentioning the scorecard, right? There should be a customer scorecard, an employee scorecard, an operational scorecard. All of these things are really important. But I feel like a lot of times that people piece is left out of the conversation unless there's an issue.
I think for me, we really look at how we structure ourselves as a product team. So I lean over and get my book. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jessica Svan's book, Built for People, if anyone can see that. And they can also see that I've got my fake, that is my real bookshelf, but differently, but Built for People, where she really talks about understanding that each company has 3 products. There's the product and service you sell to a customer. The second product is the company's financial instrument. Anyone in the SaaS world or private equity or shareholder, they don't really care about the actual physical product. they care about the financial instrument. What's their return on investment? And the third product is the employee experience. And the business model is the subscription service, and employees keep subscribing for an experience that they're being delivered. To Mary's point, doesn't just mean the people team, everyone's delivering on that employee value proposition or experience team. But even getting, so I kind of talked to my executive team when I joined, like this is the model we're going towards, and then understanding after if people is truly a product, how do we actually change our structure internally? So that was the first mindset shift for my team. We're not structured in people, business partners, talent. We're looking at feature teams. So we are acquisition, onboarding, performance development, employee experience, platforms, and back office, and how are we developing features that we help people delight our customers who are employees, to really think about how we develop, test, iterate. So the whole CX and UX journey, how are we building things with and for people and letting people know we're not going to design the most beautiful, perfect thing because we're a product team. We're going to give you a first slice, a minimum viable product, get your feedback and iterate. We're going to do the user testing with you. We're going to do the user experience with you. So for me, it's not just a mindset shift that's important. It's also the skill set shift. So the mindset shift comes more with the skill set shift. So I invest in my team in doing that. So I think that's one piece. I think the second piece in this model where it's employee experience is helping HR teams understand the employee isn't your only customer. The board members are also your customer. With people in any tech space, at least, people are the highest amount of OPEX on anyone's, sheet. So it's understanding if we're truly thinking like a product or customer team, we have to be thinking in similar metrics to them. We have to be thinking in similar solutions design. And then there's an actual mindset shift in the workforce because I see a lot of modern people teams wanting to work in this way. And what holds them back sometimes is actually a workforce expecting a more archaic model of sort of administrative service policy. Like a lot of people don't want to do that anymore, but a lot of businesses expect it because that's what they think HR is. So I think for us to shift, it's got to be like a change champion network at a leadership team level and the people team themselves, knowing how to either not people please or fall back into old modes of working.
Absolutely. All right, we've got about 20 minutes left. So we're going to kind of shift into some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want to first of all mention a few things that we have coming up. So we're going to be trying out a few different things, running some two-part workshops later this summer where we try some vibe coding for HR and building custom apps that may help you achieve things that you need to achieve, but haven't had quite the tools necessarily. The first one, we're going to be building something around offboarding analytics and how we can make better use of this data. So registration for part one of the workshop will be open soon and will be sent to all of our newsletter subscribers. So if you want to hear more about that, definitely subscribe to the newsletter. It's a great way to do that. If you want to hear more from our speakers today, I'd encourage you to follow them on LinkedIn for more insights and best practices. And we're going to put those links in the chat. And before you take off today at any point, because I know in the next 15 minutes we'll start to lose people, but we want you to know that we love feedback. So take a second, let us know what you thought of today's event. Let us know if there are any topics you'd like to see us cover in a future session. We read every single one of these that comes in. So that link will also be in the chat. So, okay, so let's get to some of your questions. One that was sent to me said, our leadership team sees our UX folks as a product-only function. I have been stopped from pulling them into people products that could help maybe improve some of the features of our internal systems. How can I sell them on those folks being involved on internal things as well so we can optimize some of the tools that we're using? I don't know if anybody has experience with this, but just feel free to chime in.
I make friends with the UXers, and so when they have capacity, get them involved because often then they can tell their team leaders, hey, I see this as a different way to augment my own career plan. So it's actually sometimes if you make friends with the people. The second part is I don't rely on the UX team. Build the skills yourself. There's so many great free courses out there. Help your team understand the UX skills. I've recently bought, I'm working with the Futures Kind, lovely collective in the UK. There's other people like that who can teach some of the service design UX principles. So if you can't get them to do that, start training your team in that, start getting them to be more T-shaped in their skill sets, get your team to become friends with the UXs. If there's communities of practice within the company, join those. If there's community of practices outside of the company, there's so many wicked groups out there that are free, some are paid. So I think convincing a leadership team is hard. If you can find one or two people within your team that are good, people want to back winning horses. Like, I'm not calling people horses, but like that idea of people want to back winners. So find a few winners and create that energy. People love energy. People love teams that are succeeding and doing something cool or different. So I would try a multi-prong approach of work through UXs, bring the training into your team, and start getting your team members to start being T-shaped and joining communities internally and externally. But otherwise, I think you might be waiting a very long time to convince the leaders if there's just one approach.
All right. I don't know if anybody else has anything on that, but if
Well, I'll
not,
just say I love, Vanessa, that you're looking at sort of the free resources because that's always a great way to go. But I was just thinking it's easier said than done, but building that business case around what resources you need and why and what the impact's going to be to the organization. So if you are going to outsource some of the UX work for the things that you're working on in your function, there's a cost to that to the organization where some of the UX team might have capacity and or it's an interesting opportunity and an employee engagement opportunity to offer them the chance to work on something internally and make an impact. So that's another way to approach it.
all right.
I love that too, yeah.
All right. Well, another one that's come in here is how do I convey my purpose of culture change, coach, and the introduction, or it says introduce my implementation model for fostering culture change to the direct managers who are supposed to be my champions of change if they are not buying into their roles of being those drivers or they're too busy. Um, this one is kind of a ask me anything. I think, yeah, if anybody has any advice on this, it would be very much appreciated.
Okay, I think I'll attempt that one because this is something. One thing about change is, you know, managers, for example, are key to change initiatives. However, people change when they see the benefit for them. As long as those managers don't buy in, uh, I don't know who that person is, he or hers initiative it won't happen, right? You can't run a culture change program without the buy-in of the people who will benefit from the change. So maybe she should be asking herself, I'm assuming it's a she, but just she should be asking herself the right questions. Who's the change for? Because if you can't, buy-in is I buy into something because I see the benefits. So if she hasn't sold the benefits and the people are not in on the benefits, then they're always going to be busy. We make time for what, and we prioritize what is beneficial to us. So maybe those managers don't see any alignment with what they're trying to achieve. And another thing is that real change, I don't know who the CEO is, but you have to have sponsorship in change programs, and the sponsorship comes from the founder, the CEO of the company. If that person is not backing this culture change initiative wholeheartedly, then the managers cannot be expected to act any differently. So ensure that your sponsor is on board. That should be the first person driving the change. Culture change is not an HR initiative or activity. It's a leadership one. So make sure you have the buy-in of the right people, and they should be driving the change and collaborating with you, not you doing it and you shouldn't be chasing managers to change, especially since the benefits of the change will likely be for their own good. So she might have some work to do.
Yeah. I just like to clap and
Yeah.
just times 1,000 to what Laura is saying is like changing culture, even like a champion network is never going to be be able to do it if the leadership team doesn't role model the change. I remember one of my earliest leaders said a fish rots from its head. And so
Yes.
like leaders aren't on board. I think I've done this a few times before. I was really lucky to work in my early career for a really wonderful lady in the UK, and we built a change champion network of 250. And over the time, I saw a strong unit, and then I saw people fade away. Where people faded away is exactly what Adora said: is what's in it for me, number one. If they don't see reinforcement of actual change and milestones happening, they don't do it. So my biggest like tool or tip would be, if you already don't know, Leading Change by John Cotter. It's just like the Bible of change management. Look through that, because often when things are going wrong, one or more of those steps are skipped, like building the guiding coalition, getting the leaders to communicate by, I think he said, a factor of 10,000. I work with leaders and they're like, yeah, I told the employees this. And I was like, you told them once or twice. You need to tell them till you're blue in the face and you're sick of hearing yourself. They've heard it for the first or second time. And then I think if those people don't want to do it, find new people. I know that's really easier said than done. And you could find different ways, digital whiteboards. I'll drop something I did, a LinkedIn post, which gives you the playbook of how to do culture by co-design with everyone. But I think often, and you might have done this, so sorry if I'm telling you to suck eggs, whoever's asking this question, but people find culture fluffy. And I love the culture web model by Johnson and Scholars, because it talks about the fun parts of culture, like rituals and routines, symbols, stories, but it talks about the gritty parts that no one wants to talk about: power structures, control systems, org structures. They are all culture. So I think it's a way to go, how do we make this concrete for people? How do we incentivize them? And how do leaders do this? And how do I start planning milestones from the CX perspective for moments of when people will drop off the journey? And how do I get retention in this culture strategy? The book is Leading Change, John Cotter. I think it's
I
like
just
John Cotter. Oh yeah, you've put it in.
just popped it in there. Yeah.
It's like essential for every people person or leader.
All right. Let's see. We have a couple more here. So, as AI gets more integrated into HR tech stacks, what sort of advice do you have for making sure we're not just automating tasks, but enhancing relationships?
I'll
Go
I'll
ahead.
go. I'll go first. I think that part of the problem is maybe in just the way the question is formed, which is looking at things as just tasks, right? Because it's easy to just pick and choose automating something without the bigger picture. So I think thinking through what outcomes you're trying to drive, and then working backward to what can we automate versus keep, that human element, right, is going to make that outcome, come to life. And also taking a look, I think, just at some of the risks and implications more broadly, because sometimes, again, if you're working in a functional bubble, you're going to miss some of those downstream implications for other parts of the organization or customers or employees.
Yeah. So I think one thing that would be key is a mindset shift from efficiency to empathy and fairness. Yeah, I think that's something that we need to look at in HR. So the mindset we're trying to change is one of how can we make things faster? Because automation, that's always why we automate. How do we make it more efficient? How do we look at the example, the Workday example, how can we make hiring faster and cheaper with AI? We should be changing this to how do we ensure our hiring is equitable, inclusive, and transparent, even at scale, right? So we're automating because we want to scale, we want to do it quicker, but we still need to ensure that it's equitable, it's inclusive, and it's explainable, right? So that is where I see, so that we can obviously limit the risk and limit the negative impact on, people. Like I said, it's still human resources, even if or it's people management, or it's, but it's still people, it's still human. So we shouldn't take away that human element. If we use automation, if we use tools, then we should still have a human oversee those, the outcomes, so that we make sure that there's a final check, at least, to protect us from from any kind of issues, especially, just negative ones that can affect our culture, our organization in a negative way.
I think something that's interesting for me and something I meant to say before when we talk, I think we're kind of mixing sometimes automation and the AI augmentation. Something that we didn't have in automation that we're discussing more in AI is we never had an automation ethics committee or like it was just like let's automate. But AI,
Yeah.
everyone's like shit, what is like what's happening? So I think at least we're getting ethics for AI, but that also goes back to the base, like machine learning, and a lot of this has been there for ages and some of these automations. So what I'm enjoying is saying actually the role of the people team is also to be the voice and the pusher of ethics now, and we can take that backwards to automation now from the tech stack as well. So I think that's what I'm working with our people team in business, like putting AI central, putting ethics central to our AI strategy as well. We can't delete that out. It's not all about efficiencies and productivity. There's got to be ethics here. And I think from an automation perspective, someone, and excuse me if I got the person wrong, it was in the chat said something super interesting. Maybe it was I think MJ was saying, hey, I kind of trust ChatGPT more than some people. And once again, in terms of automation or the intelligence, I'll be perfectly honest to you. I have like coaching chats with ChatGPT. Sometimes it's like nicer than some people I've worked with or coaches. And actually, people have said that a lot of humans think that sometimes an AI manager can be more empathetic than a human person. So I think I don't have an answer, but I think we're in this really gray space that could be so beautiful and so cool and also so dangerous. So I think the more first principles that we can have together to understand what are the ethics, when should we automate, when should there be extra intelligence, it's going to take a level of macro thinking that AI could also help you with that answer, but I think we need to do some deeper thinking and problem solving together around this. But I often too often I find people are just going to the solution. When should I automate this? When should I automate this? I'm not sure that's the right question anymore.
Yeah.
What you just said just reminded me of I was at my mother's house over the weekend and my stepdad asked me a question and I answered it, but then he asked Alexa because that's the official source. So
It's
it could be that I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah. But I think people, at least if that gives them the comfort, sometimes when you know you're right, we're like, cool, let's ask ChatGPT. And you're like, excellent, excellent. And also there's biases on how people start prompting it differently to get the answers that they want. But I think going back to some of the conversations around recruitment, if you ask candidates, can we put an AI note taker? We always ask. Something I noticed is you can download the transcript and then in the debriefs with the like on the hiring team, if people aren't sure, we're like, let's prompt the same transcript differently. And it actually helps bust bias of like poor, like annotated comments. Or I thought this person was a little bit too emotional. Or I thought this person was too quiet. It's like, hey, let's all do different prompts. And it shouldn't be the end solution, but it now gives us a really strong base to cut perception bias as well around this. So sorry, I went away from automation, but I'm trying to think around real use cases where we're using it. And I think my bottom line is there's so much beauty and danger in this process. So how do we be ethicists and advocates of where it could go because it's not stopping?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Let's see here. I think we got one more in here. We probably have time for just one more. Someone asked this, what are some of your favorite tools or some quick win type things for automating HR touch points that you've found and would like to share? If anybody has any. And obviously not losing warmth or that human element, keeping in line with our theme. None?
In terms of tools, I'm starting to play. I feel like really nervous. I don't know why. Some vibe coding on Lovable. So I think that's really exciting, just getting on the tools. And then just playing around with different levels of, I'm more on Perplexity and ChatGPT. And we actually just developed our new performance product. So we also started building like prompts for other people to use. And I actually nabbed this from another company I heard on a podcast, developing a prompt pantry, because we realized that some people are either writing not so brilliant prompts or just too scared to prompt. There's just a fear. So it's like, how can you be like, hey, we built this prompt for how I do the overview of my performance review. Back to CX and UX, I wrote like a prompt for my whole people team to use on doing user-centered design when we do qualitative data, writing a really good prompt of being like a qualitative researcher, doing thematic analysis, coding it for emotion, coding it for theme. So basically that's sort of what we're doing, simple level prompts and then next level sort of vibe coding, but I wouldn't say I'm doing anything super exciting yet. I'll keep you posted if I do.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to be fully transparent. Lovable is one of the tools we'll be using in our vibe coding sessions. I love it. It's been an amazing, very interesting tool to start playing with. So if you, it's one of those ones to check out. And like you said, prompt engineering is like a skill in and of itself now. If you know how to do it, it changes the results you get drastically. So, all right. Mary or Adora, I don't know if you have anything you want to share on this one.
No,
Well,
I would say, yeah, I mean, hello.
there's a
Oh,
lot. There's a lot coming. I think a lot
mhm.
to explore. We're actually, as a consulting firm, working with customers to build out a pantry. I love that term. We haven't used that, but action activation is an offering that we're leveraging for what to do, like after you listen to your employees, right? Because a lot of companies get stuck at that stage. But creating a library of nudges that can be used through Teams or through Slack goes directly to the managers and is that personalized nudge based on their results. So we're building a lot of that right now ourselves and incorporating it through existing technology. But I think there's going to be more technology built to do that specifically. So we're going to get even faster and better at doing it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to say before we sign off, but all right, folks, there you have it. Of course, a huge thank you to our panelists, Mary, Vanessa, Adora. Thank you so much for being with us today, giving us your time and your expertise. It's always so much fun to talk. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you.
And